DBS presents CNBC TV18 India-Singapore Connect.
The DBS India-Singapore Connect Summit brought together leaders and policymakers to explore how innovation is transforming opportunities. With discussions on technology, entrepreneurship, and wealth creation, the summit highlighted a future of shared progress.
A very, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of DBS Bank and CNBC TV18, a very warm welcome to everyone in the audience as we kick off the inaugural India-Singapore Connect Summit.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What an absolute honor it is to welcome you all to the DBS India-Singapore Connect, a gathering that celebrates the remarkable bond between India and Singapore. Over the years, our nations have nurtured a partnership that has transcended boundaries, becoming a beacon of innovation, trust, and mutual growth. Our journey, ladies and gentlemen, began with a shared vision for prosperity and collaboration, which has evolved into a powerful bilateral relationship that's been built on strong economic, technological, and cultural connections. Now, as India is the sixth largest trading partner, Singapore accounted for almost a little over $35 billion in bilateral trade last year, and that's a significant 29% of India's total trade with ASEAN. Even amidst the global economic uncertainties that the world is faced with today, Singapore remains steadfast, contributing over $11.7 billion in FDI, making it India's largest foreign investor in 23-24, a testament to the trust and confidence that both nations enjoy. So, ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to a stimulating conversation on the road ahead. Appreciate you being here this evening.
Good evening and very warm welcome on behalf of DBS to the India-Singapore Connect Summit. The occasion that we celebrate 30 years of DBS in India. 30 years actually coincides almost with the 30 years post-liberalization. The India-Singapore partnership, government-to-government partnerships, and you'll hear a lot about that, has strengthened kind of simultaneously as India has grown post-liberalization. The growth of our franchise over the last 30 years, but more importantly in the last 15 years, have been spectacular. The last decade that has seen the biggest growth for DBS in India. Please put your hands together as we request Mr. Piyush Gupta, Group CEO of DBS, to come on stage and make his special address.
Roots of connection between India and Southeast Asia are obviously historical. They are very, very deeply rooted in a big sense of time and history. Unfortunately, in the last 50, 70 years post-independence, the regions have not lived up to the history or the promise. And partly it is because India, after colonization, tended to look west. Asia got drawn into the ASEAN system, and then in more recent years into the growth of China. That's not to say we did not trade. Obviously, we traded a lot, we did stuff. But the promise, to my mind, was underfulfilled. Having said that, in the last 10, 15 years, it's quite clear that things have started shifting. I think one of the most important things in my observation was when our former Prime Minister, Senior Mr. Mentor Minister in Singapore passed away in 2015, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a half-day trip to pay tribute. And the Indian flag flew at half-mast. It was something which was noted and observed in Singapore. That sense of specialness that existed even then between India and Singapore was marked, and I think under the surface, you started seeing progress. Shireen pointed out Singapore and India's trading relationship. I think what's even more profound is Singapore's foreign direct investment into India. Much of that has happened in the last 10, 15 years. The question in the TV script earlier said, which is India, who's India's largest FDI? Well, it is Singapore. And a lot of people in India tend to believe this is like Mauritius, round-trip money. Well, it's not round-trip money, it's Singapore money. $150 billion plus minus over the last few years. And it's in every category. In the port, Jawaharlal Nehru Port, in the airports, in the airlines, in telcos, in industrial parks, in energy, in the bank. In every sector, Singapore is deeply rooted and deeply invested from an investment standpoint. Both GICs and Temasek's portfolios in India are in the tens of billions of dollars. Unfortunately, the narrative in India has been in Singapore, because we're 75% ethnic Chinese, tends to be part of the Chinese circular system. So we in Singapore are a very pragmatic nation. We're a trading nation, we're an investing nation, we look for opportunity, and we actually focus on where the opportunity is best. I'm really encouraged that in the last 3-4 years, we've both begun to realize that there is tremendous opportunity, the unrealized promise that I said, between our nations. So a couple of years ago, I think it's probably the only forum, 7 ministers from India and Singapore got together in Delhi for the first India-Singapore Ministerial Roundtable. To the best of my knowledge, this forum, this kind of format where ministers get together and spend half a day or a day talking about ideas, does not exist. It's not a normal and natural thing to happen. Alongside that, we had the first India-Singapore Business Roundtable. Some of us from the Indian business community and some from the Singapore business community, we got together at the same point in time. Fast forward earlier this year, we had the second Ministerial Roundtable, this time in Singapore, and this time 10 ministers got together. I will have the privilege of chatting with the ministers later, and I'm going to ask them what exactly they discussed and where we think this relationship is headed. But once again, we had the business roundtable alongside. This time we had a dozen business participants, and I'm actually encouraged. And normally these wind up to be talk fests, but in this case, they're very specific action plans, and we can see the trajectory, the direction of travel is actually very, very real. It is very compelling. DBS has been a big exemplar of Singapore's thrust into India. Honestly, it's not just because I'm of Indian origin and I wanted to do business in India. Right from our board, our senior team, our shareholders, Temasek, there is a long-term vision and belief that India is going to define a big and important part of DBS's future. It is today the country where we are the largest number of branches, 500 plus. We are in 350 cities. We are in 19 states across the country. It is our fastest growing business anywhere of all the businesses that we do. We have a Gift City branch which is growing really well. We have a technology center in Hyderabad with 4,000 people, which I loosely say is not Foxconn, it's Apple, because it's the hub of our innovation system. So our business here continues to grow well. And my last comment, a lot of it is on the back of the relationship that we have with many of you. You have been fantastic. You've been supporters, you've been cheerleaders, you've been partners. And so I want to wind up with a big thank you to all of you for helping us to get to where we are today, for helping show the way. Thank you all.
DBS presents CNBC TV18 India Singapore Connect. DBS presents CNBC TV18 India Singapore Connect.
And now it's time to invite our next speaker for the evening, Honorable Minister for Home Affairs and Minister for Law, Mr. K. Shanmugam.
History is not destiny, and a new history is being written every day in Southeast Asia by new companies, new countries, and India has been not that present, at least in the past. It's beginning to change. And over the past 30 years, DBS has put itself into India, has shown its commitment to India, and has brought its practices and its excellent service to India. And it has helped to tremendously strengthen the economic linkages between India and Singapore. It was the first Singaporean financial institution to come here and establish a base. And through its efforts, it has supported the entry of many Singaporean companies and investment into India. And it has participated actively in digital pilots between India and Singapore, such as the UPI Pay Now linkage. DBS, of course, owes a large part of its success in India to the leadership of India's Ministry of Finance, Reserve Bank of India, and the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India. They have created a conducive financial ecosystem for businesses like DBS to thrive and innovate. Our companies are present in states across India, from Delhi to Tamil Nadu, Gujarat to Assam, and Singapore, India's largest investor, with well over US $160 billion cumulative FDI flows. And year on year, most years, we are also the largest single investor, and this is certainly not round-tripping money. 90% of the government's focus in any country would be domestic. Nevertheless, senior Indian ministers within a few weeks of the elections were in Singapore, among the first countries they visited, in order to discuss key issues, Indian-Singapore Ministerial Roundtable, and we'll have the third one early next year. We were able to invest here in this way because of visionary leaders and policies in India, which have continued under the current administration of Prime Minister Modi. Business leaders have also helped us tremendously. For example, the late Mr. Ratan Tata, he was an important partner to Singapore on several of the path-breaking ventures. Today, India is the world's fifth largest economy and the fastest growing among them at 6.5%. A decade under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi has brought about transformative reforms, improvements to infrastructure, and the ease of doing business in India. Indian companies have also performed very well and are increasingly expanding outside of India, areas where we could work together. We agreed on 6 areas: sustainability, digitalization, skills development, healthcare and medicine, advanced manufacturing, connectivity. And in September, Prime Minister Modi visited Singapore, endorsed these areas for cooperation. And PM Modi also witnessed the signing of MOUs in a number of areas. And again, on skills, we are doing many things together. For example, top students from Odisha have been invited to Singapore for a 6-month internship, provides them with hands-on learning and cross-cultural experiences. We will also be looking at maintaining quality standards in technical skilling through certification. Our former Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, always believed that India is an intrinsic part of this unfolding new world order. India is a major power and has the heft to be bracketed with the United States, Europe, and China. And in this new world order, Singapore continues to be a good friend and partner to India. The India-Singapore relationship is a strong and enduring one. It's built on deep historic, diplomatic, and economic ties, and we look forward to building on this foundation and exploring new avenues for cooperation and innovation. Thank you very much.
We're now going to dive into the ministerial panel discussion with the theme Charting the Future of India-Singapore Ties.
First question to Minister Piyush Goyal. The perspective from India, what is your assessment of how the two ISMRs are going, and where are the areas that India really believes that we can do a lot more? I know there's some discussions, particularly in skilling and in semiconductor. So maybe you can enlighten us a bit on that, sir.
First of all, congratulations, Piyush, on 30 years of DBS. You've done some wonderful work, and my personal compliments to you for the outstanding job you've done as CEO. I think the India-Singapore round table was a very unique experiment. I haven't come across this kind of a ministerial round table in my 10 years in government. Usually we do have ministerial engagements. We also have multiple ministerial engagements, but they're always with aides. And in this particular relationship, we have taken it to the next level, where we work without an agenda, we engage with each other with an open mind and an open heart, Shan, if I may say so, and we let ourselves deliberate on a variety of subjects: global, geopolitical, economic, bilateral, multilateral. And therefore, the engagement we had in Singapore, the second of its kind with 10 ministers in attendance, really helped us refocus on areas of international interest, bring back on the table areas where we could mutually add to each other's economy, add to the well-being of the people of Singapore and India. We recognize and understand sustainability is an important subject, but what do we do concretely to impact the lives of people? How can India and Singapore go beyond just a partnership where Temasek and GIC invests in the renewable, or DBS invests in the renewable energy space in India? So for example, I recall in the first ministerial roundtable, we had extensively discussed about having undersea cables between Singapore and India, and at some point of time, make the Prime Minister's vision of one world, one sun, one grid a reality. If Singapore, India take this forward with the earnestness with which we've discussed it in the last roundtable, we could set a benchmark to kickstart the exchange of energy, renewable energy particularly, and in the long run look at a global grid. We discussed how we could look at now leveraging the India's national interconnected grid, which we did in the first 3 years of the Modi government. And today, we can offer most reliable power anywhere in India, 24/7 with adequate backups. And if we tap from the high tension lines, you cannot get it better than that in terms of grid reliability.
Just say one or two things about the ISMR. It allowed us to talk very frankly and put all our cards on the table and not just get into niceties. So we got into a lot of detail. And at the end of which, Piyush started asking me for advice on how to deal with other ASEAN countries. So we left off at a good stage.
And I think this is an experiment that is certainly going to give us very good results, and something which at some day I expect many other countries to emulate.
Oh, thank you. That's sort of consistent with my parallel view. I was looking from the other room and seeing how the ministers were interacting. And I really saw a lot of warmth and bonhomie. Mr. Tansiling, so I want to ask you, as you look at India today, evolving from your business role, but now to ISMR, the business opportunity, in your role as Minister of Manpower, the skilling, education interface, how do you see the opportunities and how do you see the evolution over time?
Remembered, I first addressed CII in 2016. I was invited, and at the time I was in Delhi, and I actually delivered a keynote address then. I have always been very long in India, and I believe that, I know I'm here with the Temasek colleagues, right up till maybe just about a couple of years ago, probably the group that I used to run still put in the single largest amount of investment in India in one single transaction. I'm very optimistic about what we can do. I hope that Singapore will be a big part of that growth in India. I hope that we can be given the opportunity to grow with you, to partner with you, and to walk, to run, and to really soar this journey with you.
So in terms of skilling, I know there's some ITEs doing some skilling work, etc. What are the other opportunities? Educational institutions, internship programs, are there other things which are on the anvil?
I think the key thing is the opportunities are tremendous. And I want to also suggest to you that even though the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few. So let's maximize the use of that precious resource, that very precious manpower resource, and see where we can get the maximum bang for the buck. And I want to suggest we can start with the areas that you're keen on looking at: semiconductors, looking at digitalization, looking at even research, bilateral research in terms of R&D, in terms of innovation. I think those are the areas that we can do quite well.
All right, on that note, please join me in giving a big round of applause.
DBS presents CNBC TV18 India Singapore Connect.